So before I introduce Beth, just a reminder of the uh, keeping in mind those equity questions that Dr. Sandra Hughes Hassel brought to us a few weeks ago when she did a short facilitation. And we really think it's important to keep these questions at the forefront of our mind, particularly when we're thinking of the role of the library in a community. So the first one is, to what extent does your concept of equity in libraries boil down to providing access to library resources and services? And in what ways may that reinforce existing power structures? And then what might equity in library services look like if you thought beyond access? And I've had several people who have said how helpful they have found those questions to be. So now I am very pleased to introduce BethYoke, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at the Cincinnati Hamilton Public Library. Some of you know Beth either from her facilitation of small breakout rooms during this whole process. We are so happy that Beth has been able to help us with this throughout this role, throughout this these Zoom sessions. And or you might know Beth from her previous work as Executive Director of YALSA, the Young Adult Library Service Association. Beth's experience working with library staff nationwide, such as the Future of Library Services Forum and with Teens, A Call to Action, and her current work in Cincinnati makes her well suited to lead us as we think about the role of the public library in times of crisis. I'm really pleased to have Beth here with us today. And we have a Padlet that you can add your ideas to as you listen to what Beth is going to talk about. And on our Padlet, we're asking you to think about how do Beth's thoughts and the readings that we asked you to read, Beth gave us those ideas for those readings, connect or not connect to your day-to-day library practice. So Beth, thank you again for being here, and you are on.
Thank you. Let me try and share my screen with you all. And thanks for making the time to be here today. I know everybody is busy. And thanks to SLJ and Mega and Linda for leading these conversations. It's an important conversation to have in a very critical time. So I have, I believe, 20 minutes to talk to you today. I'll do my best. But like you, the pandemic has prompted me to rethink a lot of things, including the fundamental purpose of libraries and our work. So this presentation that I'll share with you today is kind of where my thinking is right now, but the landscape is changing constantly, so no doubt, my thinking and opinions will evolve as well. And I certainly don't expect or even ask you to agree with everything or even anything that I say today, but I do just want, I'm hoping to get people thinking and being open to some new possibilities. So this may seem like a weird place to start, but just bear with me. And then this relates to the document, the 21st Century Public Servant Summary Report. That was the reading that Linda mentioned a while ago. So a public servant is a government worker. Government workers are funded by the taxpayers. So the vast majority of public libraries are funded by taxpayers and the government. So those of us we are government workers and public servants. And as a public servant, our main duties are to be outwardly focused on the welfare of the public and society. So it's all about addressing community needs to build a healthy, resilient community for everybody in the community. And these are some characteristics from that summary report. And I kind of tweaked or threw in one or two others that I thought fit with a public servant working in a library. And then I think we can all agree that we strive to embody the characteristics on the previous slide. But what I want to suggest or posit to you today is that we are doing some things through a lens that is a little off kilter and incorrect. So if we think about what a public servant does based on our readings, there's that focus on the community members' needs. And then there is also an outreach component, but that outreach component is listening to the community. And the goal of that is to help us identify those needs. And then another component of a public servant is to identify issues and align resources. And then there's that last piece of co-creating solutions that empower community members and help everyone in the community thrive. So, you know, where I have been thinking is that we have become library servants, not public servants. Our focus is on our facilities and the stuff we have in them. And then instead of our outreach being more about listening, like a true public servant, a lot of time it's about being the expert who goes out in the community and tells people about the stuff in our library and how great it is and how great we are. So there's a difference there, a key difference. And then also, instead of necessarily, you know, in the front end of things, identifying issues and aligning resources, we just go out and buy stuff. We pick stuff out and buy it, and then we put it in our libraries. And then lastly, then we host programs that feature our stuff. And then oftentimes we are hosting these programs ourselves as library staff and not letting community members lead or co-lead these kinds of presentations. So, I'm thinking that we have allowed ourselves to stray from our purpose of serving the community by focusing on our stuff. And we're spending too much time concentrating our time and energy and resources on what is in our spaces, all that stuff. And we are not fully living up to our mission to address community needs and serve the community. And, we have, as a profession, let the pendulum swing too far towards the stuff and away from the people in our community. We are fundamentally about people. We are public servants. We serve the people in our community, especially marginalized populations who aren't by and large using the library. So think about that equity lens from Sandra Hughes Hassel. Too often we default to only serving the people who come through our doors, either virtual doors or physical doors. But to serve marginalized groups, that's harder because they're often the ones not coming to see us. So, and it's harder for us because we are these library servants and we are too busy focused and guarding our stuff to leave the library and go find these marginalized communities. So in kind of thinking through this issue on my own, I think these are the 5 things that I wanted to talk about today. And the first one is how do we change our own mindset? So we need to begin by embracing that true public servant ethos. Not a library servant, a public servant. We're focused on people first. And then we need to align our time and energy to addressing those community needs, not on organizing stuff and promoting stuff and buying stuff and talking about stuff, but it's addressing community needs. And to do that, we need to think differently. So we have to get outside the library bubble. We have to see what others are doing, what other public servants are doing to make a difference in the community and how we might connect with that. We need to learn from other professions, other institutions. And we also, at an individual level, need to personally seek out continuing education and professional development, including building cultural competence skills, getting back to that equity focus that Sandra Hughes Hassel asked us to have. And we definitely need to challenge the status quo. Libraries have essentially been unchanged for a couple of centuries. So that we need to have to shift our mindset, we need to think differently. And we also need to acknowledge that our profession is not about us, it's not about our library, it's not even about our stuff, right? So we have to put our personal experiences, personal preferences aside, put our ego aside, and really focus on our community. That's what we need to do. And then a second step on my list of 5 things is we need to make it not be about the stuff. The longer we perpetuate that idea and allow the community to have that mindset that the library's main purpose is to house and hand out books and stuff, we are hurting ourselves and ultimately hurting our community because it's limiting our impact. And we need to be police about language we use and imagery we use. I'll give you an example from this morning. The first thing I did when I got to work was I had an email from my marketing director. We are renovating and expanding one of our branches right now, and the construction company wanted to put a big banner on the construction site to kind of toot their horn about what they're doing and what the library is doing. So it was a big banner that said, "Our next chapter." Well, there are two things that are wrong with that. One is it's the word "our." So it's inwardly focused about us. And again, it's not about us, it's about the community. And this particular community is a community in great distress. There's a lot of trauma in there that's long-term. So there are systemic racial issues. That community went into free fall after the recession. There were a lot of foreclosures on homes that pushed a lot of people out of their houses. So that word "our" is not appropriate. The library is for them. And then that chapter word, that's perpetuating that stereotype that we are just about the books. So this kind of thing happens all the time, and these words may seem little and insignificant, but they're not, because they feed this incorrect mindset the community has that that's all we do and that's all we're about. So this is where I wish I had more time to think about it. If we're not all about the stuff, then what are we all about? And I think we are community developers. Our job as library staff is to help both individuals and the community as a whole be the best at what they want to be the best at, whatever that is. And then that other reading, no, actually still the 21st century public servant reading, they had the infographic on the page. So, oops, I went too far. So what we are is about that infographic kind of in a nutshell. So we're connectors. We build and foster relationships, and that the infographic called it networkers. We are empowerers, or we need to be empowerers. We have to create opportunities and remove barriers, and we need to be problem solvers. So engage with others to address these community needs. And then I think, you know, if we talk about what our unique expertise is as library staff, these next two things come into play. This is where the books and the stuff come into play. We are information navigators. We help others find and identify authoritative information. And that UN report talking about the role of public servants in the pandemic highlights the importance of having accurate information during this health crisis. And then we are also a resource weaver. So we have this depth and breadth and resources in our libraries. So it's our job to marshal those resources for the specific community needs. And then besides this, what we as individuals do in the library, there is also still, even in pandemic times, the library as space. So we provide space for community members to convene, connect, reflect, heal, and be. And I do like this quote from Winston Churchill. I think, you know, right now we're a little bit like a drug dealer, I would have to say. So we're pushing books on people who most times, especially in crisis, need something else. So think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If people are hungry, people don't have shelter, they don't have safety, a book is not the first thing they need. They need these other things first. Then they need our resources. So this is not a small thing. A study came out a couple years ago that said 51% of kids who go to public school are living below the poverty line. There is a lot of need out there, a lot of people who need food and shelter and other things before they need a Twilight book from the library. I would also say, personally, with the systemic racism that's been such a central part of the news lately, the library did put out a list of like recommended reading to fight racism, and we did get feedback from the communities that that is not what I need right now. As a person of color, I have a lifetime of trauma I need to deal with. I need systems to change. I don't need a book. So that's a personal experience recently from where I am. So books and library materials, they are a slice of the pie, but they're not the whole pie. And we need to kind of make room to focus on the rest of the pie and not just the stuff. You know, I think it is really a call to action, and that's why I put the Churchill quote there. Now is our time to modernize, to refocus ourselves back on being a public servant, not a library servant. But this opportunity is a window that is closing. So we need to work with a sense of urgency. This crisis gives us a leeway to try new things and stop doing old things, because there's a much higher tolerance for risk and experimentation. So we need to be intentional and carve out time to innovate, even though everything is upheaval and there's a lot of stress right now. It is an opportunity, and we need to commit to seizing that opportunity. Okay, so a third step that we can do is, if we're going to be true public servants, we need to listen. And we need to listen to community groups and individuals. It's also an ongoing process that's never finished, because community demographics change and community needs change. So reaching out to nonprofits, community councils, government agencies, those are a great start. And when you reach out to them, ask them what community groups they know of and they work with, and you can gradually build your network. And individuals, we know our library users. We need to get to know our non-library users. And again, that equity lens that Sandra Hughes Hassel wants us to have, we need to reach out to those underserved communities. It's harder and it takes more time, but that is what we need to do, because that's where the greatest need in our community is. And then also the media. So keeping up on the news locally and beyond that, it helps us be proactive, so we can anticipate trends and needs and be poised and ready to respond. And it doesn't take us forever to kind of realign resources and adjust to what these changing needs are. The library where I am now just started a community engagement effort last year. And with one branch, we wanted those branches to really learn about their communities and the neighborhoods they serve. So we asked them to develop lists of local contacts. So these nonprofits, these community councils, it might be individual community leaders. And their first go at it with this one branch, they came up with 24 contacts. So we continued our community listening and community engagement efforts, and less than 2 months later, that list grew to 80 contacts. So you might think you're in a small area, rural area, a tight-knit area, whatever. There are still tons of groups and resources and community leaders out there that are probably as yet untapped. So that's something to be aware of as well. And then related to this is leveraging community assets. The library is not going to have great impact if it's operating in a silo. So we need to seek out those community assets and work with others to combine our assets with theirs. And we can't make assumptions. We can't assume we know what people need if we have not lived their experience, because we might have one thing in mind, but in reality, they might need something very different. And oftentimes, low-income communities, what happens is they have stuff done to them. So the government does something to them. The schools do something to them. But really, as public servants, we need to do things with them. We need to help them create a solution that is going to work for them. And I would say even distressed communities have assets, so it's a matter of working with these community groups to identify what they are and then leverage them. And then also this start with the willing, whomever it is. So you might think, oh, I should really work with the Y, or I should really work with the schools, and then they're unresponsive when you reach out. That's okay. Just find someone who is willing to work with you. When I was a school librarian, I thought, oh, the English teachers, no brainer. They'd love to work with the school librarian to help students succeed. Well, they were kind of a squirrely bunch, a little insular, so I didn't get anywhere with them. But then a math teacher approached me, and that was not my first thought, that the school library and the math connection, but we had a great collaboration. And once other teachers saw what we could do to support students, then they were open to coming to the school library and seeing how we could collaborate as well. So just in general, we need to be open to trying something that the library hasn't done before, or perhaps no library has done before. And if it benefits the community, it's worth exploring. And then this fifth and last piece is leading from wherever you are. Probably none of us in this conversation are the boss of the place, right? But we can lead. We don't have to have that job title to be a leader. Part of that is being proactive and not passive. Think about what can you directly control or decide, or what can you influence? And then as a piece of that, don't assume that you can't or aren't allowed. So uh, that will help you get into that kind of proactive place. Ask questions, find out, and then be solutions focused. If there is something that you see that is wrong, we talked about like changing organizational culture, changing systems in libraries. Don't just point out what is wrong, but come with a solution for that particular challenge and problem, and use data to inform what that solution is. So if you have a strong rationale, that puts you in a strong footing to be able to affect this change. And then also, again, it's not about us, it's not about the library, it's not about our stuff. Focus the communication and the conversation on what the community needs. If you're outwardly focused, then everybody can get around that. And it's not about, you know, which department should lead it or which job title is best suited to do that. It's about, we just need to come together and address that community need. And then for your personal growth and development, seek out and engage other future focused colleagues, people who are willing to think differently, people who have some creative ideas, and be a great teammate. If you want to be a leader, first you got to be a great teammate. And as part of that, asking for help is important too. None of us know everything, that's for sure. And I think it makes you more human and more approachable when you ask for help. And then as part of your personal development and growth, seek out leadership skills, whether it's through a formal process or an informal process, job shadowing, something like that. Those are some things to keep in mind. And again, in trying to shift us from being library servants back to our fundamental role as public servants, these are just 3 organizations that I would recommend that you kind of spend some time on their website and dig into and see what resources they have. Share them with your coworkers. Think about how you might be able to start a conversation at your location about this public servant idea. There goes my alarm. I'm at time. So to wrap things up, I know it's an extremely stressful time, but we can either answer the call and tell our grandkids that, or we don't answer the call and we tell our grandkids that during the pandemic, we were just too stressed to pitch in and help the community when they need us the most. And I know none of us want to tell our grandkids that. But really, if we don't fully answer the call, we are also the architects of our own demise, because the community will see us as unnecessary because of our inaction or because of our limited action, and then we become obsolete, and that is the end of us. So I know it's easy to feel overwhelmed. It seems like a big task, but it is a great time of opportunity, and we should really seize that day. And remember that popular saying, you can only eat the elephant one bite at a time. So that's some food for thought for today. Thank you for listening, and I'll turn it back over to Linda and Mega.